kind of like, it's cool when those conversations get discovered because
it's unpredictable for once.
Unpredictable, but it allows us to be able to learn each other more.
Our first night pod. I don't remember.
Night pod. Our first one that we never posted, we did that at night. Our tester one.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
It sucked.
Well, I think we were just like...
trialing it?
Yeah. I don't think we had any intention to post it.
It wasn't even the episode was bad. It was just all of this we didn't like. Of course, that's what we're doing right now, but that's what we have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny? Like...
the coloring's going to be bad. It's just
the
what it's going to be.
The visuals make so much of it.
Well, I think it does because what we just talked about in the last episode of like keeping people engaged, if it looks shitty, it's hard to want to look at it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's why I love like the Modern Wisdom one. Like the amount of effort that he puts into his locations and the cameras that he has, I think it's...
Yeah. Yeah, I want to try to play with these camera angles to be able to get more of like the table and that sort of stuff, just because we have stuff on the table and the visual might be better and more colorful rather than just like a white wall and an orange curtain and whatever we're wearing.
Yeah.
I think it'd be cool.
Could be cool if we have the capability. I mean, we just might not, and that's okay too.
Well, and if not, we're moving in like 6 months, 7 months, that the visual will change then.
It's gonna have to.
Friggin' like 40 episodes later, it'll change.
Yeah. I know. If we would have just done this in the Texas podcast room, I think it would have made such a difference. It's like we were able to kind of, I mean, granted the not sitting across from each other, but it's like we could have popped a table in there.
We also have tried to, probably more so because of me, but we've tried to make this very easy to set up and convenient.
That's true.
Rather than like changing the whole room every time we go to do it. So.
Well, we would have been able to there.
Right. Yeah. But for here, it's like simplicity.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like Florida has been.
So just bear with us, people.
I feel like Florida has been that altogether. Just like simplicity. I think Texas we try to make so extravagant.
Yeah.
And crash and burn.
Everything's bigger in Texas, so we just kind of fell into that.
Yeah, totally. And then here it's like, let's just be chill.
Yeah.
It's like we've totally done that.
That's what's, I don't know. Again, I don't know if we've talked about it on here, but we talk about it a lot together, and maybe a lot of people will not relate to this, but well, I bet some people do, just with like phases of a life. I think we have adjusted a lot or been able to learn a lot by each place that we've lived has brought a different lifestyle or a different dynamic or different jobs or environment that sparks up different things, that it's almost like a cheat code for
forcing you to change,
working on yourself. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I am not typically a relaxed person or someone that just like would let go of things or be fine with it not being a certain way.
Yeah.
And I really embraced or like almost liked or celebrated what that is here.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it carrying into other areas. Like, I can still focus on the things that I like that doesn't need to change, or that's not necessarily bad that I'm like that, but I don't need to be that in every aspect of life.
Right. Well, it's hopefully you can take that to wherever we go next, you know, like, and just continue to have that and do that. And, and hopefully, like, I don't know, almost like taking it as like, no, that's just a skill you've learned, and the environment here has been able to like help make that okay.
Yeah.
That's like, now just take that skill somewhere else. So
yeah, I've
doing that.
I guess that's what I was trying to get at, was like each place has kind of given us new tools or given us new ways of being that will be, I think, what I take away from living here. One of the things I take away is just like being a little bit more efficient or picky with where I care that much about things.
Yeah, because, which is funny because we just talked about how much we take a lot of things very seriously, but this, like, living here, I think has helped us learn to not take every single thing so seriously. That it's like the environment and the group that you're around, and exactly what you said, like, how can I be more efficient? It's like, there's certain things that I should be very serious about and I can give more energy to because I'm not being serious about these other things. It's like, you're just wasting time or energy caring about this thing that's like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're so bored, or you so don't have enough going on that you need to be so uptight about everything. It's like,
and just so emotional. Like, that's what it was for me. It's just like so emotional, and thinking that I needed to care that much about everything, or potentially I did actually care about it.
Oh yeah, you're not faking the feelings.
Yeah. You're
actually feeling them. But it's just like, it's like you said, how can I be more efficient? It's like, do I really need to worry about these things or deal with these things in my brain all the time? It's like, nah, let's just cut that shit out, because it's taking away from the stuff I actually want to progress with and get better with.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know if this is just me growing up or working with
Starts
you
crying.
Or no, it's just like, I don't know. I think there's a part of me that still wants to even question myself with that stuff, because like, are you just being lazy? Are you just, you're choosing the easy way out, but you're just saying you don't care about it? But I think in the ways that I'm thinking of certain things, like these things were just so stressful for me before, and it would ruin my experience, or it would make me not do something because of how much I cared about it. That's like, I can choose to not care about it.
Yeah.
Like,
but I think that takes repetition and practice too.
Yeah.
But as long as you continue to practice that, it's like, you can make something just not be a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
Or not be so worried about it anymore.
Yeah. I've noticed myself saying that, like actually saying that to myself, of like, you can choose to not care about this.
Yeah.
You can choose to like have this not be a big deal, and just like have that be one of those things you don't care about anymore.
You know what's so stupid but has worked for me a lot is, it happened in the car the other day with us, where we just were kind of bickering.
That was all day yesterday.
No.
Besides when we were teaching. You were teaching good.
It wasn't even then. It was a different day. And
of course, this is one of those times we're not even gelling with when we were gelling.
Yeah. And I just had a moment where I was like, I'm not going to be annoyed or upset about what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm just not gonna.
Yeah.
And it's so stupid how much that works for me. It's like what I said about the practice and repetition. I think I've just practiced that enough to be able to go like, I'm not going to continue to be annoyed by this. Like, this is so dumb. I'm done. And I think we have this weird thing of like, almost like we feel like we need to be upset about it because we're going to get something out of that for some reason, or it's
for me, it's almost like it shows that I'm caring about this. To where it's like, if we're bickering or we're not getting along or we're whatever, like, I guess not to get too insight, but like last night we were talking and you're like, we should just like sit down and have a drink and talk and blah, blah, blah. So I'm settling into this, like, this is going to be such a fun night. Like, I love when we do this. I love when we have a drink and we get to chat about things, and it's like, we're not going to put the TV on. There's no like worry of that coming into play. And it's like the conversation was just us butting heads the whole time. Or in my head the whole time of like, oh, this sucks. Like, and you get tired, and I know that. In my head, I have made this plan of like, he suggested that he wants to have a drink and talk. So the whole him getting tired and not being able to want to have those conversations or whatever, that's like going to be set aside because we're having that type of night. And when I was in that zone of like, oh, this sucks. One of these times that we get to do this is now just ruined, or it's just like, it's not what it is, but that still counts as one of those nights that we do that. And it's like, it just wasn't it. And I was like, I consciously, again, I made it just like, you can just choose to not care. You can just choose like, yeah, it was a sucky night. Who cares? On to the next. You'll have a gazillion more of these. It's going to be fine. Like, it doesn't need to have so much weight to it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that used to be very, very hard for me. Because I would put so much, like, it's this or nothing.
Yeah.
That was just one of my versions of like, choose to just not care. You naturally are caring a lot, but you just don't have to. And then go to sleep. And it's going to be fine.
For some reason, that seems so sad.
Well, and the reason why I bring that up with the, like, you know, the caring is I think sometimes when I would first start to do that, I'm like, oh, that sucks. Does that show that I'm not caring as much anymore because I don't have this tie to wanting to have good conversations with you or wanting to have that time or blah, blah, blah. Like, is that me showing like, well, you're just saying don't care. So then are you not caring about the dynamic? It's like, sometimes it's just going to be off and it's not going to be good. And that's okay. Because we're going to have a bunch of conversations like that or nights exactly like that. And it's going to be awesome. Nothing is riding on that.
I think why it seems sad to me is because you're saying don't care about it. Which I think it's to each their own, like whatever makes you feel better. But I think I would struggle with that. The don't care about it.
Why?
Because I think it's like, I don't know. Which obviously if that is real to you of it wasn't a good night, I think accepting and moving on, viewing that as not a good night, and then saying just don't care about it, seems very sad. It seems like a route to disaster.
Okay, so I guess let's talk that through. Like, maybe challenge me on that. My viewpoint of when we're in those conversations or where we're just not gelling. Like, I felt like last night it was just every conversation we were having was
You said like we were butting heads or just like we weren't agreeing on things.
And it wasn't even that we weren't agreeing. It was, I think we get to a point sometimes where, and I think you're able to articulate it very well in moments like that where you're like, I'm on E. Don't have gas in the tank. I'm tired. I don't have the brain power to have this conversation. That it's like, we're not going to hear each other maybe as efficiently as we normally do, or we're not going to maybe even just piece together the puzzles of the conversation of like, well, she's saying this or he's saying this, and I'm also going to tie that back into that, to where we're just like, what is that about? Or like, what does that connect to where maybe in like more of a full functioning brain, we would have been able to do all that. So it's like, we were just both not running on good. My perception of it is like productive thoughts. That's like, oh, we were just kind of running in weird circles, and like, maybe this is like, oh, this is new ground we haven't talked about before, and we're not great at talking about this yet. And the reason why I'm seeing it as a positive for myself is, before, I would have either, well, let's stay up and keep talking until we find the sweet spot, until we find where we can talk about it and it makes sense and we're both driving, and then it never happens. Or I'm going to go to bed just pissed because you said we were going to have a night that we were going to talk, and then that didn't happen. So now I'm upset because you just were tired. Well, or it's like, well, yeah, and that's okay.
I think that's where I'm getting caught. Is you had an expectation of what it was going to be, and because it wasn't that, now it's the words that I said is now not what happened. To where it did, to me, happen. We did have a night where we just sat and talked, but you wanted it to be, you had an expectation.
Talked with good conversation.
To where it's like, if it's not that, well, now we didn't do that. It's like, well, we did do it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, so then I have to let go of, I thought this was going to look like this, of we were going to have good conversations that weren't kind of tit for tat, that weren't, oh, you're looking at the clock just waiting for me to be done talking because you want to go to sleep. It's like,
I was not doing that.
I envisioned.
For the record, I was not doing that.
For the record, in my head, okay, maybe not looking at the clock, but bringing up that's like, are we done? I'm tired. I'm getting close to like needing to be done with this.
No.
What do you mean no?
For the record.
Did you know?
For the record, I said that one time.
Yep.
One time.
And for me, that's all that I would have needed before to
you still
spiral.
Did. You still did.
I really didn't. Because it's what I'm talking about. Of, I recognize I would have in the past acted that way. I would have let that piss me off to no end. I would have not gotten over it. I'd have been pissed about it today. I would have let that spiral me. I would have not been aware of, he said this, and this typically looks like this. So if that situation doesn't happen exactly like that, I'm going to have a problem with it. Because I love when that situation goes like that. So now that it's a little bit funky, I go, well, that's not that. Which in my head and how I feel still is true. We didn't have an awesome night of talking and vibing with each other. That didn't happen. But it doesn't mean that I am right, or that it's a black or white. Well, because that didn't happen, it's bad. It's just, that's what happened, and that's okay. And then move on. Let it go. It's like, still go to bed and still be fine and still be happy, and literally forget about it until we talk about it right now. But like, before that, I would have held on to it. It's like, you can choose to not care about this. It's okay.
And what do you mean by not care about it? I think I think it's partially it's that it's like those words just seem so heavy to me. That's like, don't
for me, my
care
version,
about it, but then it's something that seems very serious in a way.
Well, I guess for me, my version of not caring about it, I think if you're talking to most people, them saying, I don't care, like, they literally have no feeling about it, to where that's very hard for me to do. That my version of not caring is like me with my cool girl of like, it's fine. It doesn't hold that much weight. So just, it doesn't matter. It's okay. What I used to do of like, this means we can't talk. We have bad communication. This means that like we think about these things so differently because we weren't able to communicate on it. Or like I was just being annoying and kept needing to talk. Why are you like that? Why does he need to be tired in general? I was like, that doesn't, I'm not hitting the marks of where it does matter. Towards like, don't care about the silly stuff that isn't necessarily even real. That's what I mean by just don't care about it. Don't care about the shit that isn't even reality or like doesn't need to be a part of the equation. Let that stuff go. What's the baseline? We still were able to sit down uninterrupted and have a conversation. That's what matters. We still were able to do that. Okay, awesome. Regardless of how it went or if it looked a specific way, that doesn't matter because that's made up in my head.
Yeah, and in a way you can't control that part of it, weirdly enough.
No.
You know, it's like you can control actually sitting down and having the conversation, but you can't control necessarily where it goes.
So I'm just trying to be grateful of like, cool, we actually said that we were going to do this and it was able to happen. Or just the fact of like, our schedule allows us to be able to sit down at the end of the night and talk. That's cool. I can just focus on that and be happy about that. Not, oh, we kind of like just didn't gel. Like, well, that doesn't really need to matter.
I feel like that happens frequently where you have an expectation and then it doesn't happen, and that is frustrating.
Yeah. I know. That's why I'm trying to get better at that because like that doesn't make sense. That's not fair.
Do you ever feel like you catch yourself in those moments?
What part of it?
Like you said, like you thought we were going to sit down and have a conversation and like I wasn't going to get tired or I was going to not care about it and we were going to whatever and do that. Like, do you ever catch yourself with that and kind of go like, well, that's maybe not how it's going to go? Because it seemed like even you describing it or talking about it was like, there was no point where you were like, well, maybe that won't happen though. It was like, oh, he said he wants to sit down and just talk and I like doing that and that's cool. So that means like we're going to sit down and there's nothing going to be on and like we're just going to talk for forever. And kind of that too, like it's going to be a really good conversation and all that kind of stuff. I think we generally feel that way just because we typically...
More times than not, it is.
We typically do like enjoy the conversations that we have, but...
I think I'm understanding what you're saying. It's...
Like basically, do you ever catch yourself and go like, oh, I shouldn't have expectations like that?
It's not necessarily that I shouldn't have expectations, but I am getting better and I do it more so than I ever have of catching it in the moment of you're just upset because you had this ideal in your head and you're upset that that ideal isn't happening. But that was in your head.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like last night, it takes me until we're getting ready for bed and I'm still kind of like, God, that sucks.
Yeah.
To go like, think about this.
Well, and to me,
I'm not always doing it like while we're talking in the moment. But I'm trying to get better at that.
Well, to me, where to solve it is before we even have the conversation. Because like you're setting the expectations of what you think it's going to be before we even do anything.
And sometimes like stuff like that, like last night, it's hard for me to recognize that I'm having an expectation because like we just said, 95% of the time, it does go exactly like in my head. So I think I'm just using data of like, well, when we say sit down and have a conversation, 95% of the time it looks like that. But then when I'm noticing it's not, I need to recognize quicker how I have emotion attached to it and then let it go, like I was eventually able to do before we went to sleep. that I sometimes don't recognize before it's happening of, are you creating expectation, or are you just going, oh, well, when we go on a walk, this is what we do on a walk. This is where we walk. When we sit down and we have a conversation, this is sometimes what we talk about. This is where we sit. This is what's happening. Like, I'm just going off of visuals of the past, of like what this typically looks like. I don't recognize still maybe where I have emotions connected.
Well, to kind of nitpick, I rarely want to stay up super late. So it's weird that you would have that expectation of like, we're going to be up late doing this. Because I basically never want to.
Totally. And maybe in my head, because we've been staying up a little bit later, in my head, 9:30, 10 o'clock didn't clock to me as like, oh, it's super late.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, I thought we were like doing good on time. Like, I remember last night looking at the clock and seeing 9:15 going like, wow, this is cool.
Well, and for me, I knew I wanted to get up at 6.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So I'm going, well, like, I need to be in bed by 10.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that because we also have been doing that. So I didn't know what late was.
I think for me, where to solve the problem is before any of it even happens, though. Like, I think, like you said, you're doing really good of reacting to it now.
I shouldn't say I'm doing really good. I'm doing better than I ever have.
I think you're doing really good.
Thank you.
But to like basically not have it happen at all is the beforehand. You know, it's like, like you said, of going on a walk. You typically know what that looks like and what's going to be happening and where we're going to go and all that kind of stuff. And same with like, you have a visual and an idea of the conversation that if we're going to have a conversation, or we just say like, hey, let's maybe not watch TV and just talk or whatever. You typically know what that looks like, and in a bunch of other things too. But it's like, kind of like what happens on the walk if our route is closed, you know, or the park that we go to is blocked off. Or like last night, like you have an expectation of maybe what we're going to talk about, and we don't ever talk about those things.
Okay, so what, because I hear that and that makes sense to me. How, and I guess I'm trying to think, like, how do I get the best of both worlds? Because like we've talked about a lot before, like part of the fun of things for me is the anticipation of it. It's not the actual thing. So it's like,
totally, the
whole time we're teaching, I'm like, oh, tonight I can't wait to like just sit down and talk to him. Like, that'll be so fun. Like we haven't done that in a while. Like, I cannot wait to do that.
Yeah.
That I don't want to lose getting to feel that, like getting to get excited about something. But how do I do that then without, because like, but I like that a part of the emotion.
Well, to me, it like not having the expectations makes it all better, because you're not going to have this like, oh, the anticipation and I'm excited for it, and then it doesn't go the way you want it to, and now it sucks. But
then do I lose out on like the anticipation and the fun of that?
I don't think so, because if you're going into it just like, yeah, we're going to talk tonight and who knows what we're going to talk about, and maybe it's only till 10 o'clock, but it's like, we still get to do that.
Ooh, I struggle with that.
And even just the like,
I struggle with that.
If you're going through and you're kind of thinking or talking to yourself about like, oh yeah, that'll be fun and we're going to stay up super late and blah, blah, and then it's like catching yourself and being like, well, I don't know how late we're going to stay up. I don't know if it's going to be like super long, or I don't know if we're going to talk about these specific things, but if there's a chance to talk about them, I'd like to talk about them. It's just that idea of going with the flow. I think when you set all these expectations of what you want it to be, like it to be, think it should be, it's like you're asking for it to not go the way you want it to, because
sure,
like I may not be on the same page. It's like you saying, like,
yeah,
you know, I just thought we were going to stay up late. It's like, I'm never looking to stay up late.
No, and I didn't think we were going to do that. I think because we had just been staying up late and I have like consistently for the last couple of days, and then not knowing we were going right back into the routine of getting up early, I was just kind of under the impression of like, it's just going to kind of be roll with the flow. Not thinking we're going to stay up super late and talk. I wasn't thinking that. I was just caught off guard when it's like, whoa, okay, we're getting to bed at 10. I didn't know that. That just seemed like early in my head that to me it was like I was like a kid in that moment of I'm playing. You're like, okay, we're going to bed. It's like, whoa, could you given me a 15-minute warning?
Yeah, I guess I just thought like
I was like, we got an hour, and you're like, I'm gonna ready to go to bed. I'm like,
I thought just context clues wise, you would have been able to figure out like I'm getting up early. But you didn't.
But to me, that's also an expectation, and I'm not trying to make it like.
No, yeah.
I don't want to do like, well, just giving excuses of why I'm thinking. I'm trying to break this down to like, okay, but what is the process in my head of why I didn't do that?
Well,
this is how many days of like, well, I think we're getting up at 6. You're like, well, why we're up at late? We're gonna get up later. I'm like, well, why would I think that? We're getting up at why would you not just stay consistently getting up at the same time? I think it's just like my math doesn't.
This is just classic misunderstanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think that deeply into it.
Well, and me either. Like I said, I made my assumptions, and that, I don't know, just like, well, she probably knows that we're going to get up early, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I can sit here and describe every reason why you should have thought that, and blah, blah, blah. It's like,
sure.
But that's like me having an ego and not being able to take any sort of blame and accountability and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, I didn't describe to you or explain to you, I'm going to want to go to bed early because I want to get up early. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have that conversation.
Yeah.
And you were thinking, it's like we were thinking two different things. You were thinking like, well, we've been staying up late and getting up late, so we'll probably just kind of keep doing that. And I was like, we're done doing that.
Yeah.
Time to get back into routine.
Yeah, I didn't recognize that. Yeah, I didn't recognize that.
But we didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was just a lot of like, I think more so I was just annoyed that we were having such butting head conversations and what we were butting heads about. I was like, this is so confusing to me. And then to like, it wasn't even that I was upset that you wanted to go to bed. It was I was upset that you were, in my head, cutting off a conversation that was going so poorly. And I was like, I don't want it to be like this. I don't want it to get difficult or weird and then we shut down. It's like, I also thought we had another hour of conversation and just doing this. And then you're like, time to stop playing, go to bed. So that cut me off. But I think it now that I'm thinking about it more, trying to break it down, like it was probably that. I was annoyed that we were not communicating well, and we don't typically have that issue. And then it was, are we just falling into that gross pattern of like things get hard and we just want to cut it?
That's so weird because I didn't interpret that.
That we were even having bad conversations?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you also have, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing necessarily. It's just not the way that I work typically. you have a hard time leaving a conversation that's bad. Or like what you feel like is not a good conversation and we're maybe butting heads or whatever. It's like kind of like what you said earlier. You have to come to like, we have to figure this out and get in the zone and then we can be done with it.
100%.
Can't leave on being
100%.
like weird or not a great conversation or like we disagree or whatever. It's like, it's got to be kind of ironed out and nice.
Yep.
For you to feel comfortable leaving it, which I'm just not that way. Like, I don't really care.
And that's where I think the dynamic where I'm trying to meet you in the middle a little bit more is you've always been really good. And whether it's come from like, that's just what you're used to doing or you're used to growing up doing or whatever, like you're okay. You're better at having it be in turmoil or having it be a little funky and then forgetting about it. Like it doesn't sit with you. It's like if we're fighting or we had the like weird conversation or whatever, you can fall asleep. I will lay there.
I might sleep better.
Just thinking about it. So it's like my whole night's going to be fucked up. I'm going to be pissed at him. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, still be upset about it. So let's just wrap it up and figure it out. To where I'm trying to do a better job of what I did last night of like, let it go.
Yeah. And
let it go.
Obviously it benefits me, but I also think it's helpful of, yeah, that's way better. Because I mean, even just take me, like, sorry, I'm not going to stay up for another 3 hours just so you feel better. Like, you're fucking up my next day now.
Yeah.
To where now I'm going to be shitty tomorrow. And then that's probably going to make both of us shitty tomorrow.
Yeah.
That it might be selfish and that, I don't know, that's something to look into. But it's also selfish for you to force me to talk to you for another 3 hours because you don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh shit, well, what do we do now?
Right.
It's selfish going your way. It's selfish going my way. It's like, oh shit.
And that's where I think so then you meet in the middle as much as you can.
Yeah, totally.
As much as you can. There are plenty of times where you don't do that and you just go to sleep and I'm like, how the hell are you sleeping? And there's sometimes with me where it's like, this might be dangerous that I start to not care about this because I'm going to start to not care about his feelings about this because that's the only way I'm going to be able to cope in this moment. But at least I'm coping. Like maybe one time I'll get better at actually processing the emotions. Right now I'm just shutting it down so that I can fall asleep or like be able to let it go. That to me is still like a stepping stone in the same way that you meet me halfway of how do you feel about this? Or maybe we bring it up a different time or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's one or the other. I think we're trying to just like, can I give you 2% more than what I'm comfortable with? And can you give me 2% more than what you're comfortable with?
Yeah. I think that's
neither like it's not going to work, but it's at least closer to the middle.
Well, it's not going to work right now, but
cut
to a year, 2, 3 of
2%.
Yeah, trying to do that for each other. It's like you're going to solve a ton of problems that way because both of you are giving a little bit rather than just trying to take it all or trying to convince the other person of like, you know, if I was to sit here and go like, no, you need to change that. You need to be more like me. It's like, well, obviously I would think that because it benefits me and it gets rid of this problem. But it's also, maybe that's not the best way to go about it. Maybe it's not, you know, because I also grew up in that too, where it's like people will get pissed at each other and then stop the conversation and just leave. And then a certain amount of time later, they'd be able to communicate and come back together to where it's like, is that good? I don't know.
I think when you're in a couple relationship, no.
Probably, yeah.
Because unless you're able to cool down and a couple days later talk about it.
Well, and if you both like that way, you know, it's like if we were both like that of, you know what, I just can't handle this conversation or I don't want to talk anymore.
Yes.
And the other person was like, I agree. Perfect. Let's be done.
Totally.
It's like,
Totally.
Then that's how you deal with it. You both are in agreement.
If there ends up being a solution, not just every time something hard comes up, freak out, we're done, and that topic never gets brought up again. In a relationship, those topics need to be figured out. Sometimes they don't care and it just really doesn't matter. But sometimes they do need to be figured out. So if it is blow up, bounce, but then come back to it or whatever, totally fine. That's not really how our dynamic always has been. But it's like, I think it can be healthy if there is a solution end up being fine and found versus like blow up and it's like, well, we eventually just start talking again. It's like, but did that thing ever get resolved?
And I think that's where it can sometimes get tricky with us is we don't really blow up at each other. We don't storm out or we don't like...
I just go...
we don't like, let's just stop and cut the conversation. I think it's more like what we're talking about is we had an idea of how we wanted this to go and it's not going that way. So now it's like, oh shit, now what do we do? It's like nobody's mad at each other. Nobody's like freaking out, but it's also like, oh, we're just not like clicking or we're not like we're not really having a conversation. We're both just making points and it doesn't feel like things are meshing well and it's not going well and like, oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And I think when it's those situations,
yeah.
I'm just better at, that's what it was. That's okay. Like, we'll talk more and whatever.
I do think, and I'm trying to not give myself like, I'm better at this. I'm getting better at this. I'm not trying to just like give myself credit that's not, I don't say earned, but like not correct. But I do think I'm getting better at this, but I could definitely do much more of not making those little things a larger deal. Because
put so much weight to it.
Because I do, and that's where those situations I think irk me more than they need to, is because I go, you're right. You were making a point, I was making a point. It was me versus you. We're over that. Like, we should not be communicating like that in my head. Again, it's like, what the heck? How do we fall into that? That's crazy to me. That's like, oh, that sucks. I'm just like pissed. Like, what? Why are we communicating like that? That's so crazy that I'm just pissed. I'm like, God, what is all this freaking work for if we're still going to go back to those stupid conversations?
Well, because
but like,
you're having the expectation
we were just off.
Yeah. Well, you think that it's going to be solved for 100% of the time now. To where that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, again, football's the best example. It's like, you could be the best team in the league, but there's only ever been one team to ever win all 16 games and not lose a game in a season. There's only ever been one team to go undefeated throughout the whole year. It's because it's hard.
Sure.
There's some days that you don't got it and you don't do the little things.
Yeah.
That's life. Like, that's always going to be there. You can't expect to be 100% perfect all the time, or that 100% of our conversations are going to go this way, or we're past that. We don't do that. It's like, no, you do. It's like Tom Brady makes the wrong read, throws an interception. Mm-hmm. He doesn't go back and go like, oh, I should never throw another interception again. Mm-hmm. This sucks. It's like, no, you're going to, and you're going to throw more. It's like, but then how do you respond to that? Or how do you figure out how to mitigate that even more? It's like, now you're just talking about getting that little 1% better, 1% better. Where we don't do that, or don't have those kind of miscommunications or bad conversations 80% of the time. That's like, yeah, now you just worked at 81%. Then you worked at 82%. Mm-hmm. And you keep doing that to where it's still going to happen. And you have to give yourself the ease and the, I don't know, availability for that to happen and not beat yourself down. Because like, we're never good enough or better enough to not do shit anymore. It's like, no, I'm going to go get donuts when I'm weak. I'm going to go get ice cream when I'm weak. I'm going to skip the gym when I'm weak.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to, have my temper and anger sometimes when I just don't I don't have it that day. Then it's like, oh, wow, what? I thought he was past that. It's like, no, you're never fucking past it. It's not how it works. You just do whatever you can to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's all about mitigating.
Yeah.
That's the whole game of it. You're never going to just, oh, I'm done with that forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's where, I mean, we're talking about it right now, but I think it's for the reason of the podcast. Like, I would have not brought this up if it was just us talking. Like, I don't have the care, but I was, at least for my own awareness, I was happy that leaving that conversation, I was able to get to a point of, it's fine.
Oh,
I would have not been able to do that before. Yeah. So I was like, okay, we had those in my head. How I see those is like failures. If we can't freaking get our shit together and not have a conversation like that, everyone's doomed, because we're doing it 85, 95% of the time of it's good and it's clean and we can figure it out. It's like, shit, when we're a little bit off and we have the struggling conversations, that's just like, that's so annoying to me. Because like, God, is it ever going to be simple for people? But then I go back to like, okay, but what you just said is like, clearly not. That still allows us to get even better at it. And even if there was nothing wrong with it, I was still able to get better and practice that in the moment of, yeah, we don't argue a lot. We don't fight a lot. I don't have a lot of those times to practice feeling riled up and then going, let it go. So I was like, this doesn't come often. Time to practice it, and you better do it because it doesn't come around. So it's like the fact that I was able to go, okay, man.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's the Jocko. Good.
Yeah.
I was getting a little too comfortable with how nice and easy
breezy it was.
Yep. And how wonderful it was. It's like I needed some reminder of like, oh yeah, it can be bad. Mm-hmm. Or just even a reminder of, hey, remember when it used to be even way worse than this?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I would get real pissy and be mean about it.
And all conversations were just something else.
Or you would get real selfish and make me stay up till 2 a.m.
Yep.
It's like, it could be a lot worse.
Yep.
It could be a lot worse.
Yep.
But then it's still, hey, it's like, you're never done.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a chance to practice. Because, yeah, how do you get better at being able to just let things go and be like, you know what, it's okay, it's fine. I don't need to worry about this or care about this so much. This single conversation we had for 2 hours doesn't identify our relationship as a whole.
Right.
It's 1 2-hour conversation.
Right.
I can go, hey, maybe we didn't gel tonight. That's fine. Moving on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also based off of our last conversation on here was, I think it can be a positive if I, am still somewhat in that brain of like, yeah, but I want to be good. I don't want to just only focus on the, well, good, it's better than it was before, or you're making progress and good job. That's all that you need to focus on. Like, oh, cool. Like, there are still times where it's not going to be we agree on a topic, or mm-hmm. there is something that comes up where it's like, wow, I didn't know that you thought about it that way, or I didn't know you thought about that, how that situation occurred, or like that was your takeaway from it. And I can go, interesting. We are not, like, we were both able to kind of like, it's cool when those conversations get discovered because
it's unpredictable for once.
Unpredictable, but it allows us to be able to learn each other more.
Well, and both of us being in an uncomfortable situation where we don't agree, or we didn't see things the same mm-hmm. way. So it's like, oh, shit, okay, well, maybe I need to think about the way I'm thinking about this. And I'm getting challenged of how I view things or what I'm taking from them. And do I have blinders on? Or do I have a point of view that's very biased? Because they're not seeing the same thing I am. So...
Or like, why am I getting so emotional about this?
Right. To where it's like, I think the natural thing is I'm feeling a little bit challenged, or like my point of view is, so you're wrong.
Right.
You have the wrong point of view. Like, you're biased. You're bad. Blah, blah. It's like, to where you need to go to yourself and go, okay, where am I being weird?
Mm-hmm.
Where is my bias? Is my point of view? Do I have blinders? Do I not want to see certain things because it makes me feel emotional or weird? Or, oh, I am feeling emotional and weird, and that's where my responses are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Not from like a honest point of view that is in a way emotionless and it's logical and in reality. So those times are very frustrating because yes, you go like, we should be done with this. We shouldn't do this. But it's also, it's not a step backwards. Like, this is just another way to take a step forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you're not going.
Well,
you're on this. You're on this path going forward, and you come up to this roadblock. This isn't just because it feels familiar. Doesn't mean that you just went backwards, and are back to that. It's actually you continue to progress forward, and now look at how easily you're able to handle that because of all the things that you've learned and all the skills you've obtained to get to that point. To where now you get to this obstacle and you go, oh, okay, now I can handle this. And what do I do with that? Because even like, look at the conversations that we have now that, you know, we would argue or disagree or fight about really dumb, stupid shit. To where now we have conversations that's not really even arguing. It's not disagree. It's sometimes disagreeing, but not really. It's more so we have different points of views and we can accept the other person's and whatever. But it's about much more like interesting or serious things. It's not like you looked at me weird and it annoyed me. It's like, oh my God, okay, cool. You know, it's about things that matter more, to where those are steps forward. Even though it feels familiar because, oh shit, like we're in this territory where we're not understanding each other, maybe not listening very well to each other, or we're disagreeing, simply just disagreeing. It's like, yeah, that's all happening right now too, but
it's harder to just go like, oh, this doesn't matter, when it's like, oh, this will like greatly maybe affect how we see people or how we do things, or how, like, we'll talk about kids stuff. It's like, this will affect how we raise them based off of like our thoughts on this. Yeah. That's like, okay, that's awesome that we have the ability to have those conversations. We've built up to be able to have those conversations. And the stupid stuff of how I used not to be able to get over it as quickly. It's like, well, cool, you did that. Or you being able to say, like, yeah, well, miscommunication. Like, you didn't know that I wanted to get up early. You would have never said that before.
Well, sure, I wouldn't have taken blame for anything.
Yeah, you know, like, well, you should have figured it out. Or
yeah.
Maybe not that
well,
extreme,
I said these things, so...
Don't you remember those 2 clues that I gave you?
Yeah. 2 bad clues?
Yeah. Where it's like, okay, that is even cool that we are getting better at the stupid little things that in those bigger conversations, what we say all the time, like, as long as we eventually find a solution, let's keep trialing and erroring and understanding each other until we get to a common ground. We might not get to that in the first conversation about those topics.
Well, and common ground is respect for each other and can accept their point of view.
2%.
Common ground is not we agree.
Yes.
Common ground is, okay, I have respect for you. You have this point of view, and I can honor that, and that's great. And I can still like enjoy you or like you, or even just like go on our merry way and not be in my ego and shit on you because of for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. That this is, I could go like, oh, I'll clock those topics and then let's see, like, throughout the conversations, can I understand you a little bit more? Maybe I explain something silly in the ways that I do, or it doesn't really make sense. And it's like, well, we didn't even know I didn't even know that's what you were saying before.
Yeah. It's like you had 2 hours to talk about it. How do you think, with how complex things can be and ideas can be, it's like, that's not really that much time to be able to explain a point of view.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to this, like with relationships, whether it's, significant other, whether it's friends, whether it's family, I think we see the disagreeing and the debates as such bad things, but it is those opportunities to be able to
sharpen your communication skills.
Yeah, get better at communicating and get better at just get better at disagreeing and being able to that's what I do a lot now, which I'm glad I do. Is I think it's because I feel myself kind of get a little like, oh, I don't like this. Like, oh, I don't like that I'm getting disagreed with, or somebody's kind of pushing back, to where I'm able to recognize that and go, oh, you don't like this. Okay. Calm down. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
You don't need to like get weird and emotional. Just have a conversation. Because I think we get so attached to our viewpoint or our
emotions with
our emotion and what we feel about it. And it's like, that's not who you are. It's just an opinion you have, and they maybe have a different one. And even if they give you shit about yours, or they're aggressive or they're weird or whatever, it's like, just have a conversation. Because we get so into the right and wrong game when we get emotional that it's like, well, we can't really ever determine that. So let's just have a conversation about this.
Yep.
Let's just chit-chat about it. Oh, you think that? That's interesting. I actually don't feel that way. I feel this way about it. And maybe here's why. And, I could see how you get to that point. Or I could see how you think that way. I've thought about it in this other way. It's like, just talk about it. Don't get so ego and weird and right and wrong. And so I just go, oh, I feel a little weird. I'm not used to this territory. Like, okay, cool. This gives me a chance to practice this uncomfortable territory. But also, nobody wins or loses this. It's just a conversation. And the best possible outcome is everybody's happy at the end of it.
But that doesn't need to happen.
It doesn't need to happen, but it lets me be able to go like, you don't have to prove your point. Like,
well, I guess the only reason why I push that, coming from my point of view and how I am, is if you're saying that to me, it's kind of like, I will manipulate and change my story and change my own personal story for what I believe. If you're telling me like, okay, we can leave and be happy, it's like, well, then I'm just going to maybe lie to you so that you feel happy about it, so that you feel comfortable, so that you feel okay with the conversation. It's like, we just might disagree and that might make you uncomfortable, but we can at least have that dialogue. But I'm not going to give in because that might make you feel a little bit better. Because leaving happy or leaving like you won, it's like, you want to win the conversation, you're just debating now, and you could just be, you're playing a game. Same thing with the like leaving with a certain emotion. You can't decide that. And I'm not saying that you were. I'm just, that's something that popped into my head when you said that, of like leaving with an idea of an emotion at all. It's like what I did last night. I was having an idea maybe of what I thought it would feel like, that, you're like, well, I don't want to make this person mad, so I'm not going to say this. Or it's like, well, now you're not offering the same context of the dialogue because you're wanting them to feel a certain thing versus just let's have a adult conversation and communicate back and forth, share ideas, share thoughts, question them, question yourself, and then like whatever is left with that. That's like where like you don't have the control.
Yeah, totally.
You have control over, are you handling it with maturity and grace? That you have control over. But going, well, hope you feel happy about it. That turns into, I think, switching up the truth.
And I think for me, the reminding myself of like wanting to leave this where everybody's happy is maybe more so for me than for the other people. It's almost my tool of going, don't get so in the right and wrong or who's winning the game. It's like, I want everybody to be happy here. So my actions and what I say does guide that. Just like theirs is too. And I can't control theirs, but it's like, I need to remind myself, okay, don't be aggressive and crazy and like trying to win the argument, because like we all have, we maybe have felt like we won arguments, but then you leave and you kind of go, I don't feel good though. Like I maybe said the last word, or I had the best point, and they conceded and whatever, but I was aggressive and weird about it. And then you leave and you're like, ugh, I could tell like they didn't like that or were uncomfortable. To where I don't think that that's a good outcome. I would rather everybody feels fine leaving. Everybody feels good about leaving.
So then what's the difference between like you and I?
What do you mean?
So like say I initially left that conversation not feeling good.
To me, like what you said, you can't control the other person. I mean, it's like, I didn't do anything disrespectful or mean or rude, or I wasn't aggressive. It just, the conversation just, it happened. Like, I think that's more so what I mean by the trying to leave it happy is like me and how I talk and how I present myself doesn't fuck up the situation. Like, don't be the one who fucks it up, basically.
But I guess that's where I'm questioning is like, how do you know? And that's something that I just struggle with is like.
Well, you don't know, because I could think I'm being so nice and happy and fun and lighthearted.
Like, you're butting my head and you're nitpicking every word I'm saying. Not saying that, but I'm saying like something that could happen where it's like, it's not so obvious.
Or the other person was like, I wish you would have taken this more seriously. Like, I wanted to have a real conversation about it. Now I'm pissed at him.
Sure.
So, I don't know. It's like, maybe it's not even happy, but just trying to be respectful and not rude and not aggressive and mean and
sure,
whatever. It's like,
I'm sure those are probably more obvious. Just like,
yeah, just don't
read the room also.
Yeah, read the room and try to be in tune and know like, oh, I'm kind of getting emotional about this. I'm kind of getting irritated or riled up. Let me not respond right away. Let me take a second to try to gather my thoughts of like, how do I approach this with grace and, good choice of words to get across what I actually feel and not have my emotions be dictating the whole goddamn thing.
Yeah. Oh, and that's what I felt like last night, where I was trying to bring into the conversation because I was noticing my responses were coming from emotional stuff. That's like, you were disagreeing with me, but you were so adamant about such specific things. And I think that's where you can tell a lot of things like, where is this coming from? Because you're so, specific with stuff that I was like, okay, well, what am I doing that with? And I was like, oh, I'm noticing this. Like, there's a theme in why I'm agreeing with you. Like, we could bring up how many different stories and whatever, but this theme is kind of occurring. What the heck is that? That not arguing with you of like, why do you think that? Or like, like that was not what they said, or that's not how it went down, or that's not what you said in that moment, or blah, blah, blah. It's like trying to see the theme of like, because most of the time I think there is. It's like, why are you always noticing the blank?
Yeah.
Because I think that maybe sometimes can allow for more, at least like last night, like allowing for more, like, well, we're not going to agree on the semantics of it. We've already discussed how we hear it differently. We're, translating what someone is saying or the situation was. It's like, well, we're never going to agree with what happened. We literally have different memories of the same occurrence. But why were we both taking away different emotions about it? It's like, what is that? What's that for you and what's that for me? That, I think, can have a dialogue. We can't change our memory.
Yeah, sometimes you got to take a step back and not talk about the topic, but talk about why you're reacting the way that you are.
Yeah.
Or feeling the way that you are.
Yeah.
To where I think people do, we do that. I think people do that a lot, where it's like you're trying to prove the point and just you're reiterating the same thing kind of over and over again. And it's like, okay, there's clearly a disconnect here. Like, why are you so strongly feeling like you need to repeat the same thing?
Right.
It's like kind of stopping, going like, I've noticed you've said the same thing multiple times in a row now. Do you feel like I'm not understanding what you're saying?
Well,
because now we're talking about something different.
Yes.
And now it's like, they maybe are then able to go like, oh, why am I repeating it? Yeah, I guess I kind of do feel like, because here's a pet peeve of mine. We're talking about something, having a conversation, I'm trying to have a conversation. Of course, think I'm amazing at it, but I'm trying to have a conversation, and the person I'm talking to is not having a conversation. They're just like, whatever pops in their head, they're going to blurt out. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't relate to what I'm saying. And then when they're talking, I'm trying to relate to what they're saying. To me, that's a conversation. We're going back and forth and flowing with each other.
You're reacting off of what they said versus
just like what's
them thinking and
what
speaking.
Popped into my head, and I'm going to blurt that out now.
Sure.
That drives me nuts, because I feel like nobody's listening to each other now.
You're both just doing a podcast, so really.
Yeah, you're both doing a solo podcast, but you're talking together. That drives me crazy, because I think it's because I don't feel like I'm being listened to.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm really trying to listen to you and make points off of what you're saying. Mm-hmm. But now it's like the conversation isn't having progress. Like, we keep just going, you say something, I say something, you say something, I say something.
And it's just me versus you.
Yeah, and there's no like natural completion of thoughts and ideas and things, and it's just like blurting shit out, and that drives me crazy. So I think when people tend to repeat themselves over and over again, that's probably a clear sign of like, oh, okay, I'm not listening to what they're saying, or I'm not picking up like the direction that they're trying to take with the conversation and what they're trying to talk about here.
That's what I was noticing last night. Was like, I kept the reverse. Like, I was trying to notice that for myself of like, why do I keep, it's like, I feel like this one thing is not clicking. And I'm just like, what your responses were
Wasn't adding up.
Wasn't adding up, but you were just like, you were trying to counteract me, but it was with things that were so not related that I was like, I'm clearly not explaining this correctly. Because the way that you're translating it would have nothing to do with my feelings about it or my like what I'm trying to relay within my words. So I gotta be saying something wrong, or I'm so attached to what I feel about that the words aren't expressing it. Because I'm like, you should be talking about like my reaction to it. Like, I'm feeling this, and it's, to me, it adds up with what I'm saying, but it clearly doesn't, because the words you might even be speaking to, but because your response back to me doesn't correlate with what I'm feeling, I'm like, I'm not saying this right. I was like, no, I'm just not fully explaining.
And this is the perfect, like, this is the perfect example of how I feel like a healthy person tries to navigate and figure this thing out of what can I do differently to make this whole thing better?
Yeah.
To where so many people immediately put the blame on the other person. You know, it's like you're going, you're recognizing and noticing, okay, he's not really picking up what I'm putting down, so maybe I need to put something different down. Rather than going, right, he's not picking up what I'm putting down, he needs to pick it up. It's like, that's not taking accountability. That's putting blame on somebody else.
It's like we're teaching kids. If they're not getting it,
it's not the kids' fault. Don't just keep
saying it in the same way. They clearly didn't get it.
Well, yes.
Try it a different way.
Yes, but it's not blaming the kid.
No.
It's trying to figure out a different way to explain it, or taking the ownership of, okay, clearly what I'm doing is not working. I need to try something else. And not going like, why aren't you getting it? I'm telling you how to do it. It's like, you are so in your ego and so, I don't know, you're just like, you're taking no ownership of the conversation or the actions. That I think how we both try to work most of the time is, okay, this isn't going how I maybe want it to go. How can I dictate this or guide this so that it seems better or feels better or whatever? And it's not a control thing. It's a
responsibility.
It's a taking responsibility thing. It's not like, oh, I don't like this, so I'm going to control it so that's the way that I want it to be. It's, okay, I can tell neither of us are getting what we want out of this. Is there something I'm doing wrong here? And I need to analyze to see, oh, okay, maybe I wasn't communicating this very well. Or maybe the way that I'm talking and saying things doesn't come across as very welcoming, nice, or like I care about the situation at all. Like,
or sometimes I would say, like, I think people think they're very passionate about a thing, but it's just you're coming off very emotional and unstable. So they're like,
yeah. You're like, wow, you got a lot of feelings about that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm talking to a child. There's no logic behind you at all. So now I'm not going to have a conversation with you because you're that spiced up about something, or you're that angry about it, or you're that opinionated about it. Like,
well, and that's something that's talked about so much too, is like, if you're real extreme about a feeling or a thought, there's probably an area in here where you got to analyze and figure something out, because you got a weird emotion attached to it.
Well, that's why I had to do that last night, because I was like, why am I getting so irritated that you were not having like compassion for this person? And I was like, it's because the underlying thing, like, I struggle with that specific thing. Like, for me, it was like, for me, it's the credit. Like, I like getting credit for things. Not even credit, but like, credit just seems like a slimy word when I'm saying it publicly, because I know people are going to take that wrong. But like, recognizing where people are putting an effort I like that. I like showing that to people. I like giving them the props, that when I see that kind of being misguided, I just get really annoyed by it. So it's like, I kept bringing up the same things and the same stories. And I'm like, why are you not understanding that this person needs more credit, basically? It's like, because that had nothing to do with it, basically. Like, really, it was just, I recognize that. I was annoyed by it, and I'm expecting you to have this same weird qualm about it. But it's like, well, you're not going into analyzing that situation with the same bias that I have.
Well, and it's like, in a weird way, you're trying to persuade me to just think and feel the way that you do. Towards like, maybe I don't.
Yes.
But then there's the kind of thing wrapped up into it where like, but you think you're right. Just like I think I'm right. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's difficult. It's like, you got to detach from those things.
And that's where I go back to like the word responsibility with that. It's easy for me to see that with the teaching of, it's my job as a teacher to relay the information to you so that you are able to grow, or you're able to learn the thing, that you're able to benefit off of what the information I am giving you. So the same thing in a conversation. My responsibility as someone in a conversation is to be able to listen, try to understand what they are saying, maybe where it's coming from, or just like trying to get the full story and listen to what they're telling me verbally and emotionally. And then for me to be able to relay back the same thing efficiently. It's like, but that's a two-way street on both sides. It's not just, I'm going to say my thing, you say your thing. Now what?
Right. You have to try to mesh. That's where I think the best conversations come, is
even if you disagree.
Meshing. Yeah, even if you disagree, you're still both talking about the same thing, or you're even debating the same thing. You're meshing. Like, you're in constant flow with each other of what's being talked about and what's being emphasized or not emphasized. And I don't know, to me, those are the best. That's the way to communicate. That's the way to have a conversation. Not just like, I make a point, you make a point. Because how many times are you in a conversation where it's like, okay, but I just said this, so what about it? Like, you have no thing to say about this? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, can we acknowledge that then? Like, you don't have a thing to say about this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Moving on then. Like,
yeah.
But it's just this, like, it's like you're in an auditorium and somebody asks a question, and then just like people just start yelling different answers. Right. And yelling different things or different points. And it's like, that's not a conversation. That's just a bunch of people yelling different shit.
Yeah. You have a little battery on your phone. It's still going though.
But this is why I like the Jocko message and the extreme ownership.
Yes.
Everything that happens to you, you take ownership of, and you find a way to try to deal with it. It's like, this is giving you the ability to change your life and to do things that you enjoy and you can get better at and progress. If you're constantly blaming other people and not taking any ownership of anything, including like this conversation of talking about how to communicate and having conversations of like, well, they just weren't listening to me and they weren't doing this and they were too aggressive and they were blah, blah, blah. It's like, so you're going to take no ownership over the situation. So there's no way for it to get better now, because you're saying that they're all to blame. That's a hard way to live. You're living with everybody else dictating everything now, because you just constantly blame them and they're the problem, and everything that's wrong is because of them. It's like, well, you can't be good at anything. You can't progress at anything. You can't be the reason why things are good then, because you never take ownership.
Well, then there you go. Like, going back to my credit, let's say, like, I just get worried.
You're so like insecure about the credit thing.
I'm insecure about the credit thing because I don't want that to come back and bite me in the ass. I don't want that to be something that people use against me, I guess. Of like, oh, you're just wanting credit for this thing because I know that's your thing. So I'm just trying to be not share too much because I know that's something I'm working on and trying to be better at, but I don't want it to just like be used.
That sounds like more their problem than yours.
It's
maybe not fun to hear, but because it's probably going to be from me.
No. I mean, yes, but no.
Here she goes again.
Yeah. No, yeah, sure. It's definitely their thing, but I don't know. But it's the same thing like when things get better or your conversations get better, your communication gets better. It's like, don't you want to be part of the solution? Or do you? That's where I think you really have to recognize, like I had to recognize that for myself with us, is do I actually want to find a solution or do I want to fight? Do I want to have the argument? Do I want to just be pissed at each other? Do I want to be right more than else to get to a common ground? Because you're never going to find a solution. You're never going to be able to, like, for us, like, work together. You're never going to find an ability to meet that 2% because I'm searching for the fight. I want to be right more than I want to find the solution. And that's risky. That's like, okay, well, do you actually want it to get better? Do you want to not fight? Do you want to have miscommunication? Do you want your, relationship to be able to thrive in good communication? Well, then you have to admit that you suck to then be a part of the solution. Like you have to admit blame so that you can find a solution.
Well, I think that's how you...
It's like the ownership thing.
That's how you push people away too. Is you play the game of trying to always be right, or you don't take into consideration like that you could be doing anything wrong. You don't take ownership. You blame everybody else. It's like nobody wants to be around that person.
Yeah.
If you're blaming everybody else and you're not taking ownership and all you want to do is try to be right all the time, it's like you're going to push people away.
Yeah.
That's one thing, like along with the Jocko thing that your mom told me of, make everything about you. And not in the selfish, weird way, but in the way of, okay, this situation's happening. What am I doing? And what am I saying? How am I responding? How am I acting? Like, don't go pointing fingers and put everything outward to everybody else.
Because you lose control every time you do that.
Totally. To where make everything about you. And it's like, okay, what am I doing? How am I talking? How am I presenting myself? How am I, whatever. Every little thing. To then be able to go, okay, this is how I'm operating. Maybe I need to operate differently. Because maybe that'll help change this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw a video of a teacher that she posted it was like a kindergarten teacher, and this kid came up crying to her and just like, this kid was upset because this kid tattletaled on him and he didn't do it. And the teacher's like, did you get in trouble for it? He's like, no. She's like, do you know the truth of what actually happened? He's like, yeah. She's like, then you have no control over what other people are going to say. Like, I didn't punish you. You know what happened, so they're not changing your reality. It's like you have control over your emotions, and it seems like someone else is controlling your emotions right now because you're having a reaction. You now lost control because someone else is affecting how you're feeling. You lost control. Get your control back. Because all the logistics are in your line up. You didn't get in trouble. You know what actually happened. You're letting someone else control your emotions. And that to me is the same thing with the conversation. Like, if you don't take the self-analysis or the ownership or the, like what I said, like, am I saying this stupid? Or am I like not calculating my emotional attachment to this, because clearly the other person is not getting it. So they're not stupid. Obviously, I'm being funky about this. If they're so off the wall and like consistently off the wall, they're probably not wrong. I'm probably being weird about this. That, I don't know. It's like, I'd rather know that I can change. I can't control whether you're going to care enough, whether you're wanting to, what your outcome of change is even going to be. That's like, well, I can just sharpen my tools of communication or being able to talk to you or being able to whatever it is. That, I don't know. It's more work on myself, but I also get the tools. Kind of like I still get the benefit of it. Like what we talked about. You still go to sleep and forget about it. Nothing changed for you. But me being able to let things go, I now get a tool in my tool belt that I get to have and keep and use and whatever.
Yeah.
That's like, you put in the work, you also get the benefit of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no work when you just blame somebody else. That's easy.
It's easy, but it's also not, because you're still dealing with it. Like,
oh, see, I think you're not. Like, I think you're blaming somebody else. It takes everything off of you, and then it's like, yeah.
And that's where I'd question, like, say what, again, the communication. It's like, if I am always wanting someone else to feel my emotions and respond to that, I guarantee I'm going to continue to find that in other conversations with people, not just you.
Yeah.
So it's like, so I'm just going to continue to be a shitty communicator with everybody. It's like, so people are just going to never understand me. We're never going to find common ground. I'm always going to find myself in crappy situations. Like, that doesn't sound easy.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
It's like, I'd rather put in the work and like, then every conversation or 90% of the conversations be smooth.
Yeah. And be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good place to stop.
Bye.
All right.
Yeah, I'm done.
Take it easy.